The most dangerous weapon in a room isn't the gun in a suit's holster. It's the person you've trained yourself to look right through. The Obsidian Lounge wasn't a restaurant. It was a cathedral built for quiet violence. Hedge fund managers absolved themselves over Japanese A5. Tech billionaires buried NDAs beneath pairings of vintage Bordeaux. And men, like Jason Yong, came to pretend their empires weren't constructed from shattered bones and silenced tongues. He sat at the center table where Manhattan's skyline glittered like a crown of broken glass. Watch gleaming platinum, shoulders carrying the weight of 3 generations of blood money dressed as legacy. To the Wall Street analysts tracking his legitimate holdings, he was the architect who transformed Seoul Street warfare into international infrastructure and brutality into boardroom strategy. To those who still whispered his name in Busan's underground, he was the Iron Sovereign, still the 22-year-old who'd carved his way out of Korea with nothing but a straight razor and the kind of hunger that turns boys into monsters. Tonight, he was attempting something more dangerous than any gang war, believing in his own transformation. Amanda Cole moved through the space like smoke through marble. She didn't perform the choreographed warmth the other servers did, that calculated brightness designed to make wealthy men feel benevolent. Her face held the calibrated stillness of someone who'd learned that expression was intelligence leaked to the enemy. Her hands, controlled and economical as a sniper's, poured wine and positioned silverware with a geometry that felt tactical rather than hospitable. Jason noticed. He shouldn't have, but something in her movement pattern registered as wrong. Not clumsy. The opposite. She didn't navigate the dining room with the server's muscle memory. She cleared angles. Her eyes didn't track tips and table numbers. They inventoried exits, sightlines, and the 6 men in bespoke suits, whose posture suggested body armor instead of gym memberships. She moved like someone expecting ambush, calculating vectors of attack that shouldn't exist in a place where entrees cost $400. Except tonight, they did. At 8:42 p.m., a suppressed round shattered the crystal centerpiece on Jason's table with a sound like civilization cracking. By 8:43, the Obsidian Lounge had transformed into a different kind of establishment entirely. One where the currency was survival, the menu was violence, and the only thing standing between a crime lord and 6 professional killers was a woman the world had trained itself not to see. But to understand how a waitress became the deadliest person in a room full of assassins, you need to understand that Amanda Cole wasn't raised in the service industry of Manhattan's elite establishments. She was manufactured somewhere the light doesn't reach. In the kind of facilities where governments forge weapons from human beings, then discard them when the edges get too sharp or the conscience grows back. And Jason Yong? He'd built an empire on the assumption that money and fear made him bulletproof. Tonight, 6 men with military contracts and a vendetta bankrolled by the Volkov Syndicate were about to shatter that illusion with the kind of precision that only comes from planning an execution for months. Welcome back, my beautiful souls and kindred spirits. Before we start, go ahead and subscribe, like, and share where you're watching from. It always warms my heart to see our little storytelling family stretch across the world. Every click, every comment, every bit of love you give helps us keep uncovering these unforgettable stories together. So find your quiet place, settle in, and let me take you somewhere you've never been before. The first bullet arrived with manners, suppressed, almost apologetic, turning the baccarat centerpiece into a constellation of glass that caught the candlelight like dying stars. Amanda's body moved before her mind finished the calculation. Muscle memory older than her civilian identity, deeper than the name she'd borrowed from a dead girl in Detroit. The silver serving tray in her left hand became a shield. The steak knife she'd been using to portion the wagyu became something else entirely. Jason Yong was still processing the sound, that peculiar crack that didn't belong in his carefully constructed world, when Amanda crossed 12 feet of marble floor in a movement that looked like water flowing uphill. The first assassin, northeast corner, hadn't expected resistance from the help. His Glock was still rising when she drove the tray's edge into his trachea with surgical precision. He went down choking, weapon clattering uselessly across Italian tile. His partner reacted faster, trained. 2 rounds punched into the tray with sounds like church bells dying. Amanda used his muzzle flash to map his position, pivoted, and sent the knife spinning across the room in a throw that belonged in a different life, a different war, a different woman entirely. It found home in the soft hollow beneath his collarbone. Not fatal, but the human body doesn't negotiate with shock. He dropped. Jason's security detail was finally moving, too slow, too loud, too obvious. They'd been hired for their reputation, not their reflexes. In the kind of violence Amanda had been manufactured for, reputation was just a word on a tombstone. The third assassin came from behind the bar, professional enough to know covering fire when he saw it. But Amanda had already read the room's geometry, cataloged every angle where death could hide. She dropped low, sweeping the legs from beneath a fleeing patron, using his falling body as cover while she closed distance. She didn't look like a waitress anymore. The careful invisibility had burned away, leaving something older underneath. Something that moved like verdict and execution compressed into 5 feet 7 inches of controlled lethality. Her hand found the assassin's gun wrist, redirected, twisted with the kind of pressure that turns joints into hinges breaking the wrong direction. The weapon discharged into the ceiling. Champagne bottles exploded in the bar's backlit display, raining glass and Dom Perignon like baptism by violence. Then Amanda did something that made Jason's blood recognize her as kin. She smiled. Not with joy. With the terrible relief of someone finally, mercifully, allowed to stop pretending to be harmless. The remaining 3 assassins retreated like professionals, understanding when a contract had become a casualty report. They left their dead and wounded behind, which told Jason everything about who'd hired them. Volkov's people. No loyalty, just invoice lines and extraction protocols. Amanda was already moving toward the kitchen exit when Jason's voice cut through the chaos. Command wrapped in courtesy, the tone of a man accustomed to purchasing solutions. Wait. She didn't. He caught up to her in the service corridor, where fluorescent lights murdered the romance of the dining room's ambiance. Blood speckled her white shirt like abstract art. Her hands were steady. His were not. Name your price. Jason pulled a checkbook from his jacket, the gesture absurd and automatic. Whatever you want. Silence, protection, employment. You can't buy what I am. Her voice carried the flat affect of someone who'd had this conversation before, in different languages, with different men who thought wealth was gravity. Everyone has a price. Then you've been shopping in the wrong markets. She turned toward the stairwell, each step measured, unhurried. Not fleeing, departing. There was a difference. Jason followed, ego bruised by her indifference, survival instinct screaming that letting her walk away was strategic suicide. She'd seen his face in crisis, watched his security fail, witnessed the cracks in his empire's foundation. Those men will come back. More of them. Better prepared. He was negotiating now, bargaining with someone who clearly understood leverage better than he did. You saved my life. Let me return the... I didn't save you. Amanda paused on the landing, Manhattan's subway rumble vibrating through concrete beneath their feet. I saved myself. You were just in the blast radius. Then let me pay the debt anyway. Something flickered across her face. Not softening. Recognition, maybe. The acknowledgement that he understood the old codes, the brutal mathematics of obligation and honor that existed before lawyers sanitized it into contract law. You want to clear your ledger? She pulled a baseball cap from her jacket. Civilian camouflage, the kind of invisibility money couldn't buy. Forget you saw me. Forget what I can do. Forget I exist. And if I can't? Amanda descended into the subway's fluorescent underworld, her final words drifting back like smoke. Then you're not half as smart as your empire suggests. The train's arrival swallowed her whole, leaving Jason alone with 3 corpses upstairs, a restaurant full of witnesses, and the unsettling certainty that he'd just met the only person in New York City he couldn't afford to lose. The empire crumbled with efficient brutality. 72 hours after the Obsidian Lounge became a crime scene, Jason's world contracted from penthouses to paranoia. His accounts, frozen by federal warrants, materialized from nowhere. His safe houses hit simultaneously across 3 boroughs, precision suggesting someone with access to his security architecture. His consigliere Han, conveniently unreachable, phone pinging from locations that formed a breadcrumb trail toward obvious conclusion. Betrayal tasted like copper and expensive whiskey going down wrong. Jason sat in a highway motel that charged by the hour, scrolling through surveillance footage on a laptop purchased with cash. The kind of establishment where anonymity cost $40 and nobody asked why your knuckles were bleeding. Finding Amanda had required abandoning every digital advantage he possessed. She didn't exist in databases. No social security echo, no credit footprint, no algorithmic shadow. He'd gone analog. Bribes to transit workers, favors called from kitchen staff, who remembered a black woman who moved like violence wrapped in servers' whites. The trail led to Alphabet City, a 4th-floor walk-up wedged between a bodega and a storefront church, promising salvation in 3 languages. Jason climbed stairs that smelled like decades of other people's cooking, other people's desperation. Her door was reinforced steel disguised as rotting wood, security theater for anyone not paying attention. He knocked, waited, knocked again with the rhythm of someone who understood locked doors were negotiations. You found me faster than I expected. Amanda's voice came through the door, assessment without surprise. Stupid or desperate? Both, probably. Jason leaned against the frame, exhaustion finally catching up to adrenaline. My empire's being dismantled by someone who knows where all the bodies are buried. Literally. My own people are ghosts. My money's worthless. And the only person who's shown me anything resembling competence tried to disappear into the subway system. Silence. Then locks, disengaging. 4 of them, each with a different mechanical signature. The apartment was a cell dressed as shelter. Minimal furniture, maximum sight lines. Everything positioned for quick abandonment. A go bag sat by the window, packed with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd fled before. Amanda stood in the center of her carefully constructed nowhere, arms crossed, expression unreadable. You shouldn't have come here. I'm out of options. Jason met her eyes, dropping the pretense of control. They took everything except my life, and I'm starting to think that's only because you were faster than their timeline. So you want to hire the help? I want to survive. Raw honesty, the kind that only comes when civilization's veneer finally cracks. And you're the only person in this city they won't see coming. Amanda circled him like a predator assessing threat level, each step calculating angles, exits, the weight of his desperation against the risk of entanglement. You're asking me to wade back into the exact life I've spent 3 years burying. She stopped at the window, fingers tracing the fire escape she'd mapped 100 times in sleepless nights. The second I engage, I light up on radars I've worked very hard to stay beneath. And if you don't, those radars find you anyway. Jason pulled a flash drive from his pocket, tossed it onto her Spartan table. Volkov Syndicate doesn't do half measures. They're already pulling property records, hunting for anomalies. Woman matching your description, living off-grid, paying cash. You think that doesn't pattern match in their algorithms? She didn't touch the drive. Didn't need to. They both understood the mathematics of inevitability. What's on it? Everything I have left. Offshore accounts they haven't found yet. Contacts who still owe me blood debts. Property deeds buried in shell corporations so deep even Han couldn't have mapped them all. He met her eyes, pride finally surrendering to pragmatism. Enough to buy you a new life. A real one. Passport, history. The kind of disappearing act that takes serious money and serious motivation. In exchange for what exactly? Your expertise. 3 weeks, maybe 4. Help me find who's burning my empire from the inside. Give me the tactical edge to hit back before they hit my family. His voice fractured on the last word, the only crack in his armor he'd allowed since childhood. My brother's still exposed. 17 years old. Thinks his last name makes him bulletproof. Amanda was quiet for a long time, weighing survival against conscience, isolation against the terrible gravity of shared enemies. I'm not your soldier. I'm not your associate. I'm a contractor with one job, finding your traitor and neutralizing the immediate threat. She picked up the flash drive, turned it over like a grenade with the pin already pulled. Then you wire the money, provide the documents, and we never see each other again. No contact, no reunion, no sentimental callbacks when your next war needs fighting. Deal. I'm serious, Jason. This isn't the beginning of some partnership. It's a transaction. He nodded, but something in his expression suggested he'd heard the same promise from himself 3 years ago, back when he'd thought leaving Korea meant leaving violence behind. They were both liars. Just different kinds. The safe house was a penthouse built for paranoia. Bulletproof glass, reinforced walls, sightlines covering every approach. Jason's last undiscovered asset, purchased under a name that predated his American empire by 15 years. They worked in shifts, Amanda mapping Volkov's network through surveillance and financial forensics. Jason making calls to contacts who still remembered when his word was currency, backed by consequences. 3 a.m. found them both awake. Sleep a luxury neither trusted. Amanda sat cross-legged on the floor, laptop casting blue light across her face, when Jason emerged from the kitchen with coffee that tasted like burnt ambition. You don't sleep, he observed. Sleep requires feeling safe. She accepted the cup without looking up. I haven't felt safe since I was 12. He settled against the window, Manhattan glittering below like a circuit board of broken promises. The silence stretched, comfortable in its shared understanding of insomnia's weight. Busan, 1998. Jason's voice was quiet, remembering. I was 14, working collections for a loan shark who specialized in breaking fingers and taking daughters. He made me watch. Said it was education. His hand traced the scar along his ribs, invisible beneath expensive cotton. I killed him with a box cutter on my 16th birthday. Took his territory, his clients, his reputation. Thought I was building an empire. Turns out I was just building a bigger cage. Amanda finally looked up, recognition passing between survivors of different wars. Fort Bragg, 2012. They recruited me out of foster care. Told me I had aptitude, like emotional detachment was a resume bullet instead of a trauma response. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing the thin white line where her tracker had been surgically removed. Spent 6 years doing work that doesn't exist for agencies that officially aren't real. Then one day, my handler decided I'd seen too much, knew too much. Retirement in my profession comes with a burial detail. How'd you? Became the thing they trained me to hunt. Ghost in their own machine. Her smile was dark, humorless. Faked my death in Kandahar. Burned every bridge, every contact, every piece of the person they'd constructed. Came back to the States as nobody, figured serving overpriced steak was the furthest thing from Black Ops I could imagine. Until 6 armed men proved you wrong. Until that. She closed the laptop, exhaustion finally winning. We're both running from versions of ourselves, Jason. Difference is, yours keeps finding you. Mine I have to keep murdering. He understood then. They weren't forming an alliance. They were two drowning people agreeing to hold each other under a little longer. The evidence arrived like a eulogy for trust. Amanda had been tracing financial patterns for 16 hours straight. Shell companies bleeding into offshore accounts, payments disguised as legitimate transactions. The kind of forensic accounting that required coffee, patience, and the particular cynicism that comes from knowing everyone's for sale at the right price. Jason. Her voice carried the flatness of someone delivering terminal diagnosis. You need to see this. He crossed the room, looked over her shoulder at the screen's damning geography. Wire transfers forming a timeline that tracked perfectly with every compromised safe house, every frozen asset, every precise strike against his infrastructure. The transactions originated from accounts he recognized. His own operational funds, siphoned incrementally over 18 months, and the authorization codes, Han's digital signature, repeated like a confession written in binary. No. The word came out strangled. Han's been with me since Seoul. Since before I had anything worth betraying. Then he's been planning this longer than you've been trusting him. Amanda pulled up communications logs, encrypted messages decoded into their ugly truth. Volkov's name appeared like a recurring cancer. Meeting coordinates. Security schedules. The location of Jason's brother's private school. Timestamped 3 days ago. Jason's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered on speaker, instinct already knowing what horror waited on the other end. Hyung. Han's voice, familiar as childhood, poisoned now with victory. I imagine you've found the breadcrumbs I left. Good. I wanted you to understand before the end. This was never personal. Just business. Volkov paid better, and loyalty doesn't compound interest. Where's my brother? Jason's knuckles went white around the phone. Safe, for now. Volkov wants you broken before he kills you. Watching your legacy burn seemed poetic. Background noise. Explosions. Distant sirens. Check the news. Your headquarters is currently experiencing structural failure. Insurance won't cover acts of betrayal, unfortunately. Amanda was already pulling up live feeds. Jason's primary building, the legitimate face of his empire, was a pillar of smoke against the dawn sky. 40 stories of infrastructure, documentation, and deniability collapsing into rubble and ruin. You took everything. Jason's voice was ice over rage, the tone of someone calculating exactly how to return the favor. Not everything. Not yet. Han's smile was audible. You still have hope. I'll enjoy taking that last. The line went dead. Amanda watched Jason's face transform, civilization burning away, revealing the tiger of Busan underneath, the boy who'd killed his way out of poverty with nothing but hunger and a box cutter. Now we hunt, he said. The video arrived at 4:47 a.m., uploaded to a private server that Amanda's security protocols flagged immediately. She hesitated before opening it, understanding that some images carved themselves into memory like scars that never fade. Jason. Don't. Too late. He'd already clicked play. The footage was clinical, professionally lit. Han understood theater, understood that cruelty required good production values to achieve maximum impact. Min Jun sat bound to a chair in what looked like a warehouse. Anonymous concrete, industrial lighting, the kind of space where screams disappeared into urban ambient noise. 17 years old, still wearing his school uniform, face swollen from impact but eyes defiant in the way only the young and naive can manage. Han's voice narrated from off-camera, reasonable and calm. Your brother's been very brave, Hyung. Keeps insisting you'll come for him. That family means something to the great Jason Young. A pause. Theatrical. I told him family is just biology wearing a mask of obligation. You taught me that, remember? Back when you chose Empire over everyone who'd bled for you. The camera shifted. Han stepped into frame, immaculate in a suit that probably cost more than the ransom he was about to demand. He placed a hand on Minjun's shoulder with false gentleness. Here's how this works. You have 72 hours to deliver yourself to the address I'm sending. Come alone. Come unarmed. Come ready to kneel. His smile was a knife wrapped in courtesy. Do this, and the boy walks free. Volkov gets his vendetta, I get my payment, and Minjun gets to live long enough to learn that trust is just weakness with better marketing. Minjun finally spoke, voice cracking but determined. Don't come. Don't. Han's backhand was casual, efficient. The boy's head snapped sideways, blood trailing from split lip. 72 hours, Hyung. Clock's already running. The video ended on Minjun's face, young, terrified, trying so hard to be brave. Jason stood motionless, every muscle locked, breathing controlled like a man physically restraining violence from manifesting. When he finally moved, it was to methodically remove his watch, his jacket, the trappings of civilization he'd wrapped himself in. We're not trading me for him. His voice carried the absolute certainty of someone who'd already calculated every angle. We're taking him back. Tonight. Amanda was already pulling up satellite imagery, mapping routes, calculating approach vectors. Then we do this my way. No honor, no codes, no announcing ourselves. She met his eyes. We go in like ghosts, and we leave nothing but graves. Good. The shipping yard stretched across 12 acres of rusted infrastructure and criminal opportunity. Containers stacked like metal coffins, security lighting creating more shadows than illumination. Perfect for hiding hostages, perfect for dying quietly. Amanda moved through the darkness like something that had never been alive to begin with. Jason followed 3 steps behind, learning a new language of violence, not the loud, territorial brutality of his empire. Something older, surgical. She'd stripped him of everything familiar. No backup, no weapons louder than breath, no plan beyond the one she'd drawn in the safe house with the cold precision of someone who'd done this in countries that didn't exist on maps. 6 guards on rotation, she whispered, voice barely disturbing air. 2 roaming, 4 static. Hands inside the central office container, 2nd level. Your brother's in the modified storage unit, northeast corner. Her hand signals were minimal, efficient. Military grammar Jason was rapidly learning to read. The first guard never knew he'd been compromised. Amanda appeared behind him like physics reversing, one hand over his mouth, the other applying pressure to his carotid until consciousness became negotiable. She lowered him soundlessly, cable-tied his wrists, moved on. Jason watched her work with something approaching reverence. This was power without performance. Lethal efficiency stripped of ego. She taught him through demonstration, how to use shadow as architecture, how to read body language from 50 feet away, how to turn the environment into weaponry. A crowbar became leverage. A chain became restraint. Silence became their most reliable ally. They neutralized 4 guards before anyone realized the perimeter had been breached. The office container required different tactics. Amanda placed shaped charges on the hinges with the careful attention of someone defusing bombs rather than creating them. Controlled demolition. Nothing wasted. When this blows, you have 40 seconds before reinforcements arrive from the East warehouse. She checked her watch, synchronized to his. Grab Minjun. Follow my exit route exactly. No heroics, no revenge fantasies. We extract and evaporate. What about Han? Han's a problem for after your brother's safe. Her eyes were flat, professional. You want justice or you want family? Choose fast. Jason nodded, understanding finally settling into his bones. This was what real power looked like. Not the loud dominance of his empire, the quiet certainty of someone who'd learned that survival required becoming invisible until the exact moment you needed to be inevitable. Amanda triggered the charges. The night exploded into precision. Minjun was unconscious but breathing, carried between them through a maze of containers while sirens wailed in the distance. Amanda had called it in anonymously. Warehouse fire? Possible casualties? Let the authorities clean up the mess while they disappeared into Manhattan's circulatory system. They'd left Han alive. Intentionally. Amanda's idea. Brilliant in its cruelty. Dead martyrs inspire loyalty, she'd said, zip-tying him to a chair as his own men lay incapacitated around him. Humiliated failures inspire nothing but contempt. She'd left him there with recordings of his betrayal uploaded to every Volkov associate, every neutral party, every power broker who trafficked in the currency of reputation. By dawn, Han would be worth less than the chair he was bound to. Volkov himself required a different conversation. They met him 3 days later in a parking garage beneath Brighton Beach. Neutral territory, two parties understanding that continued war only profited undertakers. Viktor Volkov was 70, built like disappointment compressed into expensive wool. He studied Amanda with the interest of someone recognizing a familiar species. "You're the ghost they couldn't kill." Not a question. "I heard rumors. Deep cover operative gone feral." "Retired," Amanda corrected. "Ain't. And you." Volkov turned to Jason. "The Iron Sovereign, reduced to hiring American spies to protect Korean dignity." "Adapting," Jason said. "Your contract with Han is void. He's been exposed, discredited, and left breathing as an example. Your vendetta cost you operational security and $3 million in upfront payment to a traitor. Call it even, or call for war. But understand, I don't fight like my father anymore." Volkov studied them both, calculating odds, weighing pride against pragmatism. Finally, he smiled, the expression of a predator recognizing worthy opponents. "Even." He extended his hand, "but stay out of Brooklyn." They shook. Ancient ritual, temporary truce. 2 weeks later, Jason Young and Amanda Cole ceased to exist. The Iron Sovereign's empire collapsed into receivership, assets distributed to rivals and government coffers. No body was ever found. A Korean investor and his American wife purchased a small vineyard in Sonoma under names that had never appeared in any database that mattered. They kept to themselves, paid cash, and lived quietly. On clear nights, they sat on their porch watching stars emerge from urban darkness. Two people who'd chosen to stop being weapons. Minjun visited sometimes, believing the cover story about witness protection and new beginnings. He never asked about the scars. Some stories are better left in the shadows where monsters learn to be human. Thank you for staying until the end. That means more than you think. If this story touched something inside you, subscribe, like, and tell me what you felt in the comments. I read every single one because this isn't just storytelling, it's connection. And if you're ready for the next journey, don't wander too far. The next story is already waiting in the dark.